Hi everyone. Welcome to the first brown bag of the semester. It's amazing to see all these wonderful returning faces, these amazing new faces. We're so happy you're here. My name is Allie and I'm the program assistant at Women's Studies. My office is right there. If you have questions about Women's Studies, come talk to me. I promise I don't bite. And we just have a few announcements before we get started. The first is that we like to recognize that we don't own this land. This land belongs to Haudenosaunee, this Haudenosaunee territory. So we are on occupied land. We like to recognize that before we begin. A few announcements. This summer, our Colgate Women's Studies program was named 21st in the nation by College Choice, which is pretty awesome. Some events that are coming up that you don't want to miss. Alana Palooza is this Saturday. There's going to be amazing food and performances and company. You got to go. Saturday, 1 to 4 at Alana. Next Tuesday, our brown bag is a guest speaker. You'll see yellow posters like this. This is Tate Walker. She's coming. She's a Lakota feminist activist. She writes for Everyday Feminism. She's been an activist for like over a decade, and she's awesome. And she will be doing the brown bag about gender and sexuality in Native American cultures. And then in the evening at 4:30 in here on next Tuesday, she'll be doing a presentation called Surviving Love, which is about violence against Indigenous women. So you don't want to miss that, so please do come to those events. Lost my bits of paper here. If you would like to sign up for the Women's Studies Outreach, we will pass around a teal turquoise-ish clipboard, and you can sign up. If you're not signed up for the Women's Studies Outreach, you get a weekly email just once a week. Great email from us with lots of love from us and all our events that are coming up. And we just want, oh yeah, go for it.
So, on Thursday evening at 5 p.m. in Bremer Theater, we are having an interest meeting for This Is Not a Play About Sex. This year, our fellow senior and I, Claire Schneider, are directing it, as well as Sahara Zamudio is our production manager, and Mariam is our assistant production manager. It's been really great. So if you're interested in that, if you've never acted before, if you know what synopsis is, if you want to know what synopsis is, please come to our meeting. We'll be handing out some sort of material and like having a nice talk and doing icebreakers and that sort of thing. We were supposed to do something on Friday. We might change it because of the football game, because it's supposed to be 5:15 in Bremer on Friday. But definitely come on Thursday, and if we do change Friday, we will send out some sort of message somewhere.
Sweet. Thank you. And just a couple of reminders, if this is your first brown bag or your 100th, we just want to make sure we remind people that if you need to leave during the presentation, please do so quietly and respectfully so the panelists aren't distracted. Please clean up around you. We have a lot of food waste, and we have compost and trash in the back corner over there. Please try to use those. And if you can stay afterwards to help us put chairs on the racks, that would be awesome. We really appreciate it. So today's brown bag is called the F word. And I kept saying that, and then people kept guessing a different F word than what I was thinking. And I was like, okay, it's not 4 letters. We're talking about feminism today. So we will have these amazing panelists introduce themselves and talk to you about those issues. But we have some baskets going around. Where you can write down your questions if you're too embarrassed to ask them. Say you've got like a really deep, burning question about feminism that you've just never wanted to ask with it attached to your face. You can write it down, and we will collect them, and they will get to answer your questions. So those will be going around. I'm going to turn it over to our amazing panelists. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay. Hello. I'm Ciara Swan, class of 2017. I'm a philosophy major, and yeah, that caused me some interesting things about feminism and philosophy. I am Mariam Nael. I am a junior. I'm a women's studies major and econ minor. So that's an interesting mix.
I'm Dayna Campbell. I'm a senior. I'm a major in educational studies and minor in sociology.
I'm Kaitlin Abrams. I'm a junior. I'm a major in neuroscience and women's studies. Weird.
Okay, so we wanted to start off and see what you guys thought when you hear the word feminism. What does it mean to you? Like, shout out some things that you associate with feminism.
Robert.
Inclusion.
Good answers. Good answers. Any more? Okay. Oh. Okay. So we just wanted to start out with that because we thought you guys might have like some more harsh things about feminism to say, and then maybe we'll address that in the Q&A session. But I'm just gonna start off. So I already said my name. I'm Ciara. Hi. And I'm a senior here, and I'm just telling you about my journey on the road to feminism and what does it mean to me. So starting off, feminism to me means breaking down barriers for women and breaking down hierarchies, especially within male versus female and that heteronormative binary and the whole thing. For me, I started off when I was pretty young, I guess, and I didn't even know that I was starting off. My dad was one of the biggest people in my life that showed me like what feminism, like what I can do regardless, and because I'm a woman. So I kind of grew into that, but my biggest concern started springing up when I was here at Colgate, when I started seeing that I was in classes and male professors would like talk to male students, and I would say the same thing, you know, hey, I said it, and then all of a sudden a guy right next to me says the same thing. Oh, that's so brilliant, that's so wonderful. And I'm like, well, I just said it. So it took me some time to like figure out about what my positionality is in feminism, especially being a Black woman, a woman of color in feminism, because everyone's different and white feminism is not always the same as people, women of color, or even international women's feminism. So personally, for me, I've just kind of grown into it. You can ask more questions later, talk to me, Q&A questions, and I'll like explain more about my backstory.
So I think when I was in high school and before that, my feminism was kind of just very basic, like it's equality and that's it, and I did not think about my own like role in it. I did not think about how race plays a role in feminism. I did not think about anything really besides the fact that like, oh, my brother and I get treated differently sometimes, or like I'm treated differently than male classmates. But for the most part, like my feminism was about me. When I came to Colgate, I was completely like taken back by all the movements here and how many identities played into feminism that I had never considered. And feminism became more about like me stepping out of the picture and like giving space to those other voices. I think I became more solidified in my beliefs about feminism coming to Colgate, but I became less into the movement itself. I think I didn't realize like the history behind it, the history that we were taught in school, like the 3 white women that like started, I don't know, enfranchisement, stuff like that. And like just not seeing the roots from women of color, not seeing the roots just built throughout the centuries and only reading that one narrative. So I became more wary of my feminism here. But if I had to say that I was one thing, I still think I would stick with feminist. Just because I am a white woman and that's where I find my place.
Hi everyone. So I'm Dayna again. And I'm kind of going to talk about, I guess my journey, but also like what feminism means to me, especially in Colgate's context. So I guess I would say that the word feminism, it resonates with me, but it's not something that I identify as outwardly, and it's not a matter of like something that I hide, but it's like if someone were to ask like who identifies as a feminist, I would raise my hand. But it's not what I necessarily lead with, only because like feminism for me is tied to so many other like so many parts of my identity. So I went to in my high school. We didn't really have a lot of groups or a lot of support for students of color and students of color who identified as women. And that was really hard for me because I was very confident in identifying as a Black woman, as a Caribbean woman, as someone who like knew that I went through certain types of things that like a lot of the wealthy white students that I went to school with didn't go through. And I also, similarly to what Ciara was saying, that I would be in class sometimes and there would be like this silencing that would happen, and I didn't know what it was called. I didn't have a name for it, but I knew that I felt like I didn't always feel confident using my voice in the classroom setting or in social settings and things like that. So I really wanted to find spaces in high school that like where my friends and I and people that I cared about could talk about issues, could feel as though our voices were just as important as all the other people in the room. So we had groups for students of color, and we created a little subgroup that was specifically for women of color, very similar to Sisters of the Round Table, which is a group that I'm part of here. And that was really well for us. Like we were able to go to conferences, we were able to connect with faculty, we were able to connect with students from other schools. And then I think in that gave me a lot of confidence to use my voice more and like helped me become the person that I am today. Coming to Colgate, I really wanted to continue that journey and bond with other women of color and talk about our issues, talk about what it's like to be in this campus, to walk through our day-to-day lives, and what the dynamics were that we faced in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom, because as everyone knows, it's not always the easiest to be here or be in a space that's like this. So my freshman year, I was introduced to Sisters of the Round Table, and it really changed my life, and I think that it really like set me up for all the things that I've done here and that I am doing now. Because I discovered that like feminism doesn't just need to be a thing where we talk about like women and we're gonna talk about women's issues or like things that are wrong, but it's also like spaces that I think that talk about like that use feminist ideology really are nurturing for me, and like you can find home and then you can talk about music, you can talk about art, you can talk about like this person really pissed me off today in class, and that's kind of like what my feminism has been grounded in. And I have notes on my phone, so I'm not being rude. Sorry. So yeah. So also one thing that I think really was kind of a pivotal moment for me is I took an independent study entitled Black Feminisms with 3 seniors at the time, or 2 seniors and a junior at the time, 2 years ago, and it was our professor who was like our advisor was actually a white woman who I really respected and who was my sociology advisor. And I like didn't know what that meant. Like I know that I had a certain like feminism resonated in a certain way within me, but I didn't know like what does it mean to have like Black feminism versus white feminism, et cetera, et cetera. And we really we looked at the theory, we looked at work from the 90s and from the 80s, and like we looked at the waves of feminism and like what does it mean, like what is Black radical feminist thought and things like that, and that kind of also changed a lot of like where my study interests were, and like I was able to kind of explore like how my personal life and how my social life can really come into contact with my academic life, and how I can meet professors who like care about my well-being and care about what I'm talking about academically, and it's not just this is like a personal problem or something for after 4 o'clock. So I think that's kind of made it easier also to be here and want to stay here for my 4 years, and like really pushed me to want to do like academic work and be in classes that I cared about. So that was me too.
So all of that's pretty hard to follow up. But so my journey into feminism, I can't really pinpoint an exact point when that was. My parents are very much feminist and are involved with like development work. They both worked for the UN at one point. So they very much like I think were influenced me in terms of like how I saw the world and how I saw that like it isn't an equal world, and so I was always like aware of like equality. I think like as a 5-year-old, I asked my parents like, why do people refer to God as like he? Like that doesn't make sense to me. So I always like referred to God as either God or he, she. So before I knew gender neutral pronouns, I was doing that. And then as I grew older, like in high school, I learned a lot through the internet, actually through YouTube, like Lacey Green. She really taught me, like, it exposed me to the positive sexuality movement, and also Tumblr, which people make fun of a lot, but I actually have learned a lot from Tumblr.
And so I was lucky to be in a high school that like supported that. But I think something that is interesting is I grew up outside of the United States, and in a diverse racial like environment, which in a way made me not really think about my race that much. And also it was quite Western, so I think I still learned a very like white feminism. And when I came to Colgate and like took women's studies classes here, I excuse me, I read works of like women of color and women of color feminists. And there's one book in women's studies, an intro called "Colonize This," where a lot of I think all women of color write in that book and write about their experiences, and also like Asian women wrote about their experiences. And reading their work made me realize how much of like my experience as like an Asian woman, and someone who didn't grow up in the States, was silenced in a lot of the other work that I was reading, and the kind of feminism that was like exposed to me on the mainstream. So even as like a woman of color, like I still learned very white feminism and didn't even really realize that for a while. And then also I really want to do like development work and like or still continue my women's studies stuff after college. But one reason why I'm an econ minor is because I think the world revolves around money in a lot of ways. I think in all ways almost, unfortunately. And I think having a good knowledge of how that works and how that works, whether that be in NGO type things or businesses, could really help me in trying to make that work. Because I know I've seen a lot of like NGOs not do very well because they don't receive funding or they don't know how to necessarily invest in certain ways that like make it possible for their opportunities to like grow wider and to like grow more global and affect more people. So that's a bit of like my journey. And do you want to talk about like communities that we found at Colgate?
Okay. So there's SORT, which is Sisters of the Round Table. Anyone's welcome. It's awesome. But I actually find that a lot of communities at Colgate silent voices of women and minorities, and that there's not a lot of groups that deal with those issues a lot of times. Or there are groups and then they get pushed out of the groups. I'm not gonna name them, but there's always counseling. There's always groups, but I want to invite you guys to join women groups and start creating women groups because they're so sorely missed on campus. Do you guys have any other groups that you would like to plug in for?
Well, to be honest, I mean, I think that like I'm a person I like to be in student groups, as all the like faculty and staff that know this really know. So I think that like just continuing what I was saying before about like feminism going into a lot of different spaces, like the groups that I'm a part of are groups that I care about. And the groups that I care about are the ones that are talking. We're not just going to focus on like the male voice today or the men's voice one day. Like we talk about all our perspectives, and like those are spaces where I feel like I can speak if I have something to add, or other people. Like I want other people to feel empowered also to bring their perspective into those spaces. So for me, like that creates a feminist space. Like Black Student Union for me is also a feminist space. Like and it doesn't have to be titled like the group that talks about women's issues, but if you're going to talk about like for me, if I'm going to talk about my race, I'm also going to talk about how like my race is experienced through my gender, or like how how I walk the hallways or walk on campus as like a Black woman all the time, and I don't ever get to separate it. So like yeah, SORT is one thing. That we have other groups, like there's also Oasis, and I think that there are a lot of and these are all things that if during question and answer or afterwards you can ask us about like what those groups are specifically, especially for the first years in the room. But I think that yeah, like there's a lot of support, and I think that you have to like not just do the surface level like joining a student group. Like you can again like have a meeting with a faculty member who like does their own scholarship in like Southern Black womanism or like whiteness or other things, and like you can talk about how it is that you experience that, and like you can have conversations that are inspired by feminism by breaking down hierarchies, by like looking at the voices that are not in the room, or like thinking about people who are silenced. And for me, like through all the like tough things that have gone on in mine now going on for 4 years here, I think that like if you choose to be a person who speaks up and bring yourself completely into a room, like you can break, you can have those quote unquote tough conversations and not. And like if something productive can happen, like you can learn something new, you can engage someone you've never spoken to before, and like that can also be a part of feminism and is a part of my feminism on this campus specifically.
I think that also a lot of spaces on this campus that are feminist can be pretty intimidating for people that aren't in them. I know they were for me my freshman year. And I think what it took was upperclassmen coming to me directly and saying like, you should have like auditioned for this play. You should come to the Women's Study Center. You should do Yes Means Yes. And while that was not their, like, I guess, responsibility in any way, I really appreciated it. And so for the upperclassmen in the room, like if you know underclassmen that might be interested in these spaces, or even if you're not sure they're interested, just like putting out that welcome, like really could mean a lot. And underclassmen also like don't be intimidated, because I think a lot of space on this campus like really want and need you, and need your voice. So
yeah, echoing a lot of what people said, I think I also just want to say to be conscious of like where you feel right in certain spaces and like what certain spaces like make you feel good, because I knew that like I would, especially my first year, I found myself in spaces where I thought like, okay, this is like a good group of people, and especially you're trying to figure things out, but then I realized we weren't really talking about or like just being aware of the issues that like I found important, and I was lucky in high school to have friends who like we talked about that sort of stuff. Where here it took me a while to figure that out, and like I would come to brown bags and be like, okay, like this feels right, and or I would like I joined vagina monologues, and like that was one of a few of the first places where I was like, this is the kind of like Colgate I want to find myself in, and it won't happen like instantly, especially like Kaitlin was saying, it can be intimidating, but just like trying to be conscious of like where you find yourself like happy and where you find yourself like growing as a person, and like things may be uncomfortable, but that's a good thing, because I think that's where you grow a lot of the times. And I also like classes, I think, have been really big for me too, to find community, to find people who care about the same sort of issues that I do. So I think academics is like a huge thing that you can also turn to. It's not just necessarily like student groups. So yeah.
Okay. So now we're gonna have question and answer. So if anyone has questions, they can speak now, or you can get a piece of paper and write down your questions.
If anyone did write down a question, can we just make sure it gets into a basket and then we collect the like, does anyone have a basket right now?
Just keep your hand right there.
Also, just before we answer any questions, we also have some questions prepared in case you all don't have any questions. But I think an important thing to note that sometimes like the message can get confused is that like we aren't experts, and like even in the Center for Women's Studies, like there's not like one person with the right answer, which may seem kind of obvious to some, but like you're not meant. I mean, for us, like when we were talking about like what we're gonna say and how we're gonna organize this brown bag today, like it wasn't great for us to like have all the answers and have like the dictionary definition of so and so, but kind of like how we experience these things, because I like. Yeah, so it's just not, don't think that what we say is like the end all be all of feminism.
Also, one more thing, I think that sometimes in terms of like messages getting confused, like I know not all my actions like fit the way that I like my feminist ideology, and like I think that is sometimes difficult to like combine like every single action you do with that. Like I try every day to like make sure that they're aligned, but because like life is complicated and there's so many like layers to everything, not every single action like has to fit what you think, and that can be like hard on you and like on your well-being to try and think that it has to be. But just to remind yourself, and that like what I try and remind myself, that like life is confusing and complicated, and that's okay.
Okay, so our first question is, why do men need feminism? So I'm gonna think about this for a minute. Can you want to go? Why men need feminism?
Okay, we're also going to combine it with this other question that says, what is one thing you want everyone, especially men, to know about feminism? So speaking for me, Dayna Campbell, I think that men need feminism because we all need feminism. So if you expand your definition of feminism and not think that it's just bra burning or men hating or you don't want to, feminists just don't want to get married or, feminists want to choose women, they want to have children. Like that's not, like maybe that is a part of it somewhere, but that's not, that's for me at least, that's not the point, right? And that's not, those may not even be some of the like factors or characteristics of what my feminism looks like. And I think that we're on a campus that has like an amazing library and we have all these resources and like it's and like just being in the center, like I think it's important to talk more about like what is it that like why is it that feminism came to exist as a word? Like where did that definition come from? Like why have there been movements and waves and like what is it that people are fighting for at the end of it? So I mean like if you consider all of it, so I think that yeah, my short answer is because we all need it, but also like why wouldn't you want, so the way my feminism looks is like we're fighting for equality, but like voices to be heard and not just women's voices, but like people of color, people who are not able-bodied, like things like that. So like if that is what my definition is, then my answer to that is like why wouldn't you want that to be part of your discourse, part of your daily life and practice? But if you don't want that to be part of your practice, then you need to confront, some things that are going on.
This isn't specifically for men, but I think something that's typically overlooked is the building of movements and the scaffolding that has occurred over decades of this country. I think it's really easy to say like, okay, there's like the voting movement, and then like a few years later, there's like the workplace movement or whatever, and now we're doing intersectionality. But no, like this movement now like has been building for decades. Like all those movements were built by people, by women, by men, by everyone, and I think that's just something that's typically overlooked. Like, yeah, that scaffolding.
Okay. This question is, what is feminism? Why is it so undefined? And how and why do we, with our own separate identities, find common ground in how women femmes should be treated? So I think in some ways they're all related, this question. What is feminism? The definition, like kind of like dictionary definition, is the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes and genders. However, I think with what we've said, and also with the last part of this question of how our separate identities find common ground, is that it's so undefined and it's so complicated because everyone has different identities, and it's not just like one feminism that like can't fit all. It has to be mindful that like all kinds of different identities fit in a certain space. And the reason I think the way that we can find common ground and how we all should be treated is, I forget exactly who said this, but I think she's a Aboriginal from Australia activist who her and her like activist team said, if you've come to help me, you are wasting your time, but if you have come because you understand that my oppression is intertwined with yours, then like that's like what it is all about, that like there is like a larger system that all oppression is intertwined with. I think sometimes there's trouble in like naming that, but it's all like connected. And I think even what Kaitlin was saying about the scaffolding of movements, like the different like voter and then the like sexual revolution, even in terms of like Colgate's history of movements. Like I know people last year would be like, okay, so last year was about like race and like that sort of thing and like race equality, and this year it's about sexual assault and like and supporting them. But the thing is, they're all intertwined with like how unequal and like how this space is not built for a lot of people, and how it's about breaking down all of that.
I was actually gonna say something about that. So, what is feminism? For me, personally, in my like definition, it's equality. As simply as that, and it's undefined because we're all different people. We all come with different backgrounds. Like Mariam was saying, we all come in with different ideas and different classes, and so everything's entwined together. So when you get into that like idea of feminism, it's undefined because we're undefined. It's as simple as that. However, we need to work together in solidarity to make sure that everyone gets to that level of equality. And sometimes in order to get to that level of equality, this is why white men need feminists, it's because they they want to call themselves humanists sometimes, but humanists only works on the level that we're all equal. So we need to bring up women to that level and bring up people of different minorities to that same level, and then we can start talking about humanists. Then we can start talking about being equal and being fair. But until then, we need feminism.
So the next question is, can you help us understand these terms? What does white feminism mean? Are all white women white feminists? And what does intersectionality mean? So the term intersectionality to me indicates that I'm considering someone's race, class, gender, sexual orientation, ability, all of those identities and more in their person and how they're going to experience the world. So the way I walk through the world as a white woman, different than maybe how a black woman walks through the world, etc. My experiences are not only defined by my gender, but also my race. And so, as far as white feminism, I think all white women I'm a white person. I'm a feminist, so I'm a white feminist. But yes, well, maybe. I mean, I'm sure, but a lot of my ideology comes from white feminism. The history I learned originally was about white feminists. Basically, I think when you only listen to the voices of white women and only listen to the history of white women and don't consider all those other identities. So they're intertwined, intersectionality and white feminism. I think that's something that's being talked about a lot now. Not that it hasn't been talked about before, but it's coming to the, I guess, attention of like most people that are involved in feminism. That those identities have to be considered, and that you can't talk about one without talking about the others. But yeah, again, like that has not a new thing. Like there have always been race people, there's always been gendered people, and there's always been people speaking about it. But now maybe their voices are being given more attention to.
Yeah, and just to expand on that a little bit more. So like intersectionality is kind of a word that has been and is thrown around very often at brown bags, often at lectures, in class, on the syllabus, whatever. And like I think we've kind of oversimplified the meaning a lot in our casual usage of it. And that to me means that like it's not just, oh, I'm like considering this about you, it's that literally your experience, you cannot separate your experience, like, well, I can't at least. I can't separate my experience as a woman in one moment because I know that like all of like all my characteristics, all my social identities, like they all affect the way that people see me, the way that I can navigate the world, the way that I do navigate the world. Like it affects how I think about myself, like what I've been socialized to believe, etc., etc. So intersectionality, coming from the word intersection, is literally like the meeting point that is your identity that is comprised of all these other parts, and like that is who you are. So for people with varying levels of privilege for different reasons, like it might be possible for you to not consider certain things, and maybe not to consider your race as a white person like actively, but that doesn't mean that you don't navigate the world as a white person all the time, even if you don't think that you're consciously like considering those things. And then white feminism, like if you think about, or if you know anything about, or consider the history of like feminist movements and like why they came to be, like I think that oftentimes when you hear white feminism, and it's normally used in a negative way, because it kind of represents this like majority voice, or how like the women's movement largely before like the integration of like black feminists and other feminists of different minority groups, if you use the word minority, I think that there was just like a voice that wasn't speaking to the experiences of women from, you know, low socioeconomic backgrounds or people of color, et cetera, and there was a need for women who were, you know, formal and informal scholars to speak up, to write things, to talk about their experience and say like, hey, well, this is not representing me, or like just because white women got the right to vote doesn't mean that I have the same, you know, right to vote at the same time. So it's kind of like white feminism is this like labeling of what that represents, and how in some circle, or in a lot of circles, and like in academia, like people are trying to move away from that and have a more inclusive sort of feminism that just doesn't consider like the voice of white women or the experiences of white women.
So our last question, it's a long question. Is that our last question? Okay. Unless other people have questions. What I often find today is a different tension within the label feminists other than the bra-burning, hairy, lesbian, man-hating feminists. Today we find racism, transphobia, etc. in feminists. How do we both address these forces within feminism while also embracing feminism as a movement, force of social change, etc.? Yeah, that's a lot.
So I don't know if anybody wants to out themselves, but is the question like that the tension is not so much with the label feminist, or the tension is with the label feminist as like like I don't even understand the question. So is that there are racism and transphobia and all these other kind of isms that exist within like people who identify as feminists? Is that maybe the question?
Well, then I would have to say that work is not something that happens. We're not going to be perfect all the time, right? So we have to work to expel those different isms like transphobia and racism. Yes, we need to work to get rid of those in feminists. But at the same time, you can make feminism your own thing. It's something that we're working together, but it's a personal part of you. I don't know if that's like truly making sense, but you have to embody feminism on your own, and it's not just a movement. I think that's what I'm trying to say. It's not just a movement. It's like your lifestyle. It's your personal beliefs all wrapped up into what you actually act out every single day. So if you are a person who like is racist and transphobic, like, and then you claim to be feminist, then like that's bad. But but that doesn't mean that feminism embodies all of that as a movement. So.
No? Okay. Well, I just think like maybe feminism isn't your word, and like that's okay. So if you think about charity, right? So I'm sure most of you went to schools or had some sort of like a community service requirement to graduate high school, or some sort of what you did before school or before college. And in theory, when you're helping people and you're doing charity work, it's a good thing, right? You're helping people who need help. But in actuality, which is very evident for a number of reasons, and also like there are professors who teach great classes on like the effects of like global charity and things like that. You could actually be highly problematic, and you could be reinforcing this idea that like Western ideals are the best way to go, and like we need to teach you what we know because that's like again the best way to go and things like that. And that doesn't mean that like in its inception, like you weren't trying to do again a quote unquote good thing, but it just means that the reality of that is not like you're just not realizing what you meant to do, or you're doing something that's actually more violent than when you started. So for me, like people who like we're all part of this system, and again another thing that's going on, like we're all in the social system and we all have all these forces working against us, like we do, and that makes us do some really fucked up things sometimes, and like think some really horrible things, and that could be because of your grandparents, that could be because of the school that you went to, that could just be because again you have certain privileges because of your identity that like allow you to like think certain things and like be a certain way. And I think that for me, there is a lot of tension with identifying as one word and thinking that that one word is going to like be the end all be all for everyone, that everyone's going to have feminism the same way, because it's not. Because again, like I can be a feminist and all of us can be feminists, but we're also just different people. We're all different women, so it's not going to look the same for us. And also on like the life is complicated piece, like life is complicated, so as much as I want to be an advocate and try to be an advocate for people of different marginalized groups and be in a support system and a mentor and all these things, like again, I still have really fucked up shit inside of me. So I like, occasionally make sexist jokes, probably make racist jokes, probably laugh at things that are highly problematic that I shouldn't. And for me, my feminism looks like trying to unlearn those things every day, trying to not do those things, and not just so I can like scold myself and just not do it so I can be considered a good person, but because like those are unhealthy behaviors and those are not helping anyone. And I don't want to live my life as a person who is racist, transphobic, etc. So maybe feminism is just not your word, but if you put like your whole life or like all of your social justice work depends on this identifying as this one word, like you're never going to get a unifying definition. So that also takes some unlearning. It doesn't just need to be one work through to be able to like do better.
And also everything that everyone has said, but like the movement is also always changing. So like the mainstream movement initially was, even though women of color have been like feminists and writing stuff for so long before like we like learned that like feminism like started. That's like what it like initially very like white mainstream like feminism, but now like the mainstream feminism is like evolving and changing, and it's like always evolving and changing, and that's how like racism and like transphobia and stuff is being more addressed in feminism because it's like changing and because people are always like progressing and like moving forward, and like that movement is like always, I think just like the idea that it's always evolving and changing, and that it's also up to your individual self to like decide on like how you can change that and like make it bigger and not necessarily fit in those like circles and be like, oh okay, like then because I'm like a white woman, then I guess I'm also like a racist feminist, but like that's not necessarily the truth. Anyone have any questions?
And also just call it out. Like if someone is identified as a feminist and you say something that is transphobic, hey, what you just said was transphobic. Can we talk about how that's not okay, and also like doesn't line up with your supposed ideologies? Like have conversations. Like we're on a college campus. I think that like that's the best place to have a conversation.
Yeah, no, and just in terms of like kind of being an active bystander or calling someone out, that's like a really challenging thing to do. I know, particularly if you're not as like upfront as Dayna is. So one of the things that I do, which is slightly more subtle, is whenever someone says something, and often it's jokes, I'll say like, why is that funny? Or explain that to me. And like if you just keep asking someone to explain it, eventually you get to this root, which is based in some bias or some, kind of discriminatory thought. And ultimately the person will usually go, oh, and like cringe, not wanting to say the thing that is upsetting you about the scenario.
So feminism is like addressing all these oppressions, and that's kind of a downer. Is there anything that brings you joy about feminism?
I don't know. I mean, when I get to say like my ideas are heard, that brings me a lot of joy. Like when I'm getting in a space where I can be like, this is what I say. I'm a black woman and I can say it, and everyone listens. Like that brings me joy, but that's not often found. But also it is found sometimes, and it's pretty cool. I mean, that brings me joy. So.
A lot of things that bring me joy are like I love people and like socializing and like hanging out with people who feel the same way. I think brings me a lot of joy, like being in vagina monologues and This Is Not Play About Sex and like Yes Means Yes, and like finding community within that, and like finding like in our Yes Means Yes facilitator meetings, we like talk about the agenda and like what we're gonna do, but we also like laugh a lot and like do like weird stuff because like we feel comfortable with each other, and like when I'm with people who like I know care about the same things I do, like I can be like vulnerable in like ways that are like showing my emotions and like things that like have been hard for me, but also in ways where I can be like totally myself and be totally weird and like feel very comfortable with that, and like that brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah. I think people think that like if you talk about things that oppression, like you have to be a depressed person, or like that's the only thing you ever think about all day long. And that's just not true. Like I think through SWORD, but also through like socializing, meeting people through my class here, et cetera, like I've just met really amazing people, and like we've laughed, we've cried, we've had sleepovers in women's studies, we've done homework together, we've gone on trips, we've gone to conferences, and I think that like it's really about just like again expanding your definition if that's something that you want to do, and like realizing that like for me, I find joy in being able to like sit back at the end of the day and talk to someone who maybe I do know, maybe I don't know, and like them feeling like they can say something, or you can speak up against inequality, but also speak up about something that you just felt, even if it doesn't have a word with like a long definition. Like just being able to like be heard is, I think, makes me have joy, brings me joy.
I think also in a lot of the communities I found at Colgate, so many people stress self-care and like how to like be good to yourself, and I didn't really talk about that in high school, and that has brought me a lot of happiness and like a lot more peace. Also, like I've gotten the opportunities from women's studies class, but also continued this like talking to my mom and my grandma about their lives growing up, and that connection, and like seeing where our lives have intertwined over things that I just have like traditionally maybe been like angry about that they do, or like frustrated with, and like using that and like seeing really more like where we connect has brought me a lot of joy.
Any other questions? Comments?